Increasing your progesterone levels and reducing your hormonal symptoms is totally possible for you, but only if you're not making these 3 mistakes that I commonly see every single week in my hormone clinic. And hi, if we haven't met, I'm Chelsea Green, holistic hormone specialist. I help women transition from peri to post-menopause naturally using homeopathy, herbs, nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. And this is the 4th video in a series on increasing progesterone levels naturally in perimenopause. I will link the video series above so that if you have missed any of those episodes, you can grab them after this video. And do make sure you are subscribed because there's another video yet in this series. And then I'm going to move on to create a series on estrogen dominance. When we're in perimenopause and those progesterone levels fall, we naturally end up in a state of estrogen dominance. And that brings me to the first mistake that I most commonly see when people are trying to boost their progesterone levels naturally, which is not considering what is going on with estrogen. Progesterone and estrogen are sister hormones. And actually, when we talk about hormone balance, what we're really talking about is those 2 hormones being in balance. So we can't consider one without considering the other. And in case you're wondering, estrogen dominant symptoms are those ones of excess. So excessive bleeding, pain, irritability, breast tenderness, all of that kind of thing. So in order to create balance, we have to be able to clear out that excess, and that requires really good gut, liver, and bowel health. So within the gut, or more specifically within the microbiome, we have the estrobolome. That is where we metabolize excess estrogen. It has to be detoxed through 2 different liver pathways, and then it has to be eliminated via the bowel. If any of those organs aren't working well, if they're a little bit sluggish, if they don't have the nutrition or the nutrients that are required for optimum function, then we're unable to clear those excesses, and they get reabsorbed back into the system, and they aggravate your hormonal symptoms. So this means that we need to be eating lots of cruciferous vegetables, so your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, bok choy. We also want lots of liver-loving foods, so that's your sulfur vegetables, anything from the onion family, plus your bitter greens. And also we want lots of fiber, lots of soluble and insoluble fiber. I did mention fiber in the video on foods to boost progesterone, so I will link it above. You can go and check out what those foods are. My preferred way to see how well someone is clearing their estrogen is to run a Dutch hormone panel. This is a dried urine test. It's one of the 2 tests that I run in my Haywire Hormone Fix, and it tells us not only what your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels look like, but also how well you're using and clearing those hormones. Actually, we get loads of other information from it as well. What is going on with your cortisol and your melatonin and serotonin and dopamine, which nicely leads me on to mistake number 2, which is not considering the whole. You are a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual being, and in terms of hormones, we need to consider every single level of that. So you can't achieve health on any level without considering this, without looking at this, and without considering the mind-body connection. And it's the same for hormones. You can't ever look at one hormone in isolation. When we're talking about hormones, we're talking about the endocrine system, and we can think of the endocrine system as an orchestra, and each individual hormone as a musician within that orchestra. So if we look at an orchestra, if one musician is out, if they're not playing the right tune at the right tempo in the right key, then it affects the sound of the whole orchestra. And it's exactly the same with our hormones. If one hormone is out, it affects the entire endocrine system. So in terms of creating balance for your entire endocrine system, or for creating balance for your hormones, I tend to think about it in terms of 6 pillars. And make sure you are subscribed, because I will go into this a lot more detail in my next video. But I think about hormone balance in terms of 6 pillars. So we're looking at nutrition, stress, sleep, exercise, toxin exposure, and trauma. So we have to be prioritizing our sleep. We have to be exercising in a way that supports our hormonal needs. We have to be reducing our exposure to toxins. We have to be eating a nutrient-dense diet, and so on and so forth. And all of these elements work together. So it's not a case that we just take a supplement and we continue living like we did in our 20s and 30s. It doesn't work like that, because we don't have the hormones required for that kind of stress on the body. And that brings me to mistake number 3, not addressing stress. We live in a very busy, a very toxic, a very overstimulated world. We are all chronically stressed. Even if you don't feel stress and maybe you don't have any of the big stresses in your life, we are all exposed to stress all day long. We are not supposed to be this on all the time. We're supposed to actually spend most of our time in that parasympathetic rest and digest state with small amounts of time in the fight or flight state. But in our modern way of living, we're spending most of our time in that fight or flight state, which burns out our adrenals, tells the brain it's not safe to create hormones, to produce the hormones required, and then we end up with hormonal symptoms. So yes, you might not be dealing with any of the big stressors like financial worries, working in a job you hate, caring for sick relatives, but you are chronically exposed to micro stress doses throughout the day, and these micro stress doses have a cumulative effect. Starting at the beginning of the day, your alarm clock, it stresses you out of sleep. There's traffic jams, constant emails, work deadlines, trains that don't run on time, meetings that run overtime, unruly teenagers, 24-hour news cycles, social media, all this is constant. We're just constantly bombarded with all this stimulation all day long. And then we enter perimenopause and we don't have our anti-anxiety hormone progesterone. Estrogen, which gives us stress resilience, is fluctuating. So we don't have the hormones available to deal with stress, to cope with stress levels, and to be stress resilient. That in turn exhausts the adrenals. The adrenals then can't make the sex hormones that are provided once ovarian function gives up. And we end up with our hormonal symptoms because the brain will always prioritize making your stress hormones over making your sex hormones, because stress, as far as the brain is concerned, is a threat to life and it'll do anything to keep you alive. So you need to start examining what is serving you, what is draining you, what is stressing you, what you don't want in your life anymore, and at the same time start carving out some daily self-care time. This doesn't have to be a huge thing, it just has to be done daily, because like with the micro stress doses, done daily, it will have a cumulative effect. So even if it's only 10 minutes a day, ideally more is better, but even if it's only 10 minutes a day, that will have a very positive effect on your stress levels. So it could be meditation, it could be yoga, reading, prayer, being in nature. It doesn't really matter so much what it is, as long as it's quiet, it's relaxing, it's not stimulating, you're not putting more in. So, you don't want to be on a phone or on a screen as part of self-care. It's really about just switching off. My top tip for implementing a self-care regime is to keep it simple and make sure it's enjoyable. If you're trying to meditate and you hate meditation, you're not going to do it. If you are trying to do something for an hour a day and it becomes stressful because you don't have that an hour a day for it, then you won't do it. So keep it really simple and keep it enjoyable, and then you will stick with it, and you'll stick with it for the long term. Okay, so they're the 3 mistakes that I regularly see with people when they are trying to boost their progesterone levels naturally. So with all this information, where does one even start? Well, I always recommend starting with food, because when we eat the right foods, we have the right nutrients in the body, then we have better energy levels. And then when we have those better energy levels, we're more likely to make positive changes that serve us. So if you haven't seen it, make sure to check out my video. I'll link it in the description below on foods to boost progesterone levels. And if you have seen it, you can check out the next video in this series, which is a summary, everything we need to be thinking about in terms of increasing progesterone levels naturally in perimenopause.